Americans provide unpaid care for those who develop Alzheimer's or other dementias. Today we begin a three-part series with Vital Living Forum, talking with caregivers of those with brain changes. We hope that their stories and advice are helpful to you. And our guests today are Debbie, Susan, Sherry, and Pam. And also joining me is Audrey Hauser-Burnett with Orlando Health's Center for Aging and Memory Disorder Clinic. Welcome to all of you. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your role as a caregiver. And so we're going to go ahead and start with you, Debbie. Share with us your role. You're a daughter of someone with
my mother has Alzheimer's, yes.
Okay.
Yes, she does.
Tell us a little bit about your situation.
My mother started showing changes when she was about 70 years old, and it was just little things. She was forgetful. She started getting lost. Her driving skills started deteriorating, and I have unfortunately had to be kind of the pushy daughter. You know, I took away the keys. I encouraged her to get evaluated for memory issues, and then eventually she ended up in a memory facility, which is where she is now. But I still coordinate all her care. You know, I go see her. Mm-hmm. It's still pretty time-consuming, even though she gets full-time care where she is.
Yeah. Susan, you also are a daughter of a caregiver for your mother, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, as well as my aunt. Okay. So I took care of my aunt until she passed about 2 years ago, which, by the way, is how I met Audrey here. And I now take care of my mother, who lives with me, or we live together, I like to say. And so she's in the middle, almost kind of going into the end stage. And it's been different. But it's been, I don't want to say challenging, although there are some challenges. I've experienced a lot of joy with her that I otherwise may not have if we weren't living together. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to say that's a plus maybe to our experience. But I'm taking care of her now along with other family members, and we're here to help her.
Yeah. Sherry, what about you?
Well, again, I'm daughter, but my mom passed about 2 years ago. But we spent probably about 3 to 5 years taking care of her. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty tough journey, mm-hmm. because, of course, I was working full-time and having to pretty much take care of her full-time as well. So,
Pam?
It's my husband that has it. He was diagnosed a couple of years ago. He's considered high-functioning. And I noticed it, well, I actually, in retrospect, looking back, I can see symptoms then, but mm-hmm. frankly, that is the last thing you want to think about. My stepfather had it, and we went through that with him. And so anyway, it's been an interesting journey.
What are some of the cognitive changes that you noticed?
A lot of short-term memory, a lot of personality changes. Communication he's a very intelligent man who is losing that. Mm-hmm. And personality changes, I think, the most. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Decision-making. Right down the list.
And there is a list. Others that you would like to highlight, Sherry?
So for us, it was the forgetfulness started, but then when it felt like it was a quick journey, but she worked for 30-some years, and she was home and retired, but she thought, you know, it would be days that she thought she was still at work. Okay. Or she would talk to us and say, oh, I have to go she was a bus driver, mm-hmm. and she drove a medical unit, so she would be home, but saying, oh, I'm in a COI, and so it was very painful to see that part, and sure. then trying to convince her, no, Mom, you're at home. So mm-hmm. that was like the major changes.
And Susan, you live with your mother right now. What were some of the first signs that you saw from her?
Well, I had learned from my aunt that one of the things we need to do before we even notice anything, just as they're getting older, it might be a good idea to just, if they're single, in my mother's case she is, we moved in together, we purchased a home together, so that it's hers, it's mine, it's ours. But I noticed changes, just slight changes, because we're together. So I noticed that her speech, she couldn't find her words. She had a difficult time finding her words. Her problem-solving skills begin to diminish. So she could drive just as well as she could before, and she can still find where she's going, except when encountered with a problem with another vehicle, she had a difficult time being able to manage that. And so that was a clue to us that some things needed to change. We needed to step in a little more. And I think that because I was there with her, living with her and speaking to her and experiencing some of this with her, it was easier for us to get a diagnosis quicker.
Debbie, for you, how has life evolved since your mother's diagnosis?
Time is a huge problem. You know, I still have to work and support myself and take care of her, and I have to be very efficient. I have to be very organized, and you know, pretty much 6 days a week are very long days, and I've designated Sunday as my day, and that's kind of my holy day, and I only do things that pertain to me on that day.
Audrey, how important is that for caregivers as they're talking about, and Debbie said 6 days a week, and it's constant, it's ongoing. How important is it for the caregivers to care for themselves?
Well, it's really essential, and I'm glad to hear, Debbie, that you have really carved out time for yourself, because what I find in talking to lots of caregivers is they get so involved with all the needs that are more than 24/7 that they can't take time for themselves. And unfortunately, the caregivers really suffer the consequences of that, and often are not taking care of their own health care and other needs, so that their mental health also can suffer as well. So it's good that you're doing that, and I hope we can expand upon that a little bit more, because it's really, really important for caregivers to understand they'll also be a better caregiver if they can take care of themselves.
What else have you other ladies done in terms of trying to get support for when you were caring for a loved one or continuing to care for a loved one, so that you don't get burned out?
Well, for me, it was I reached out to Family First, and they've all been supportive. So with my aunt and my mother, those were two different sides of the family. My aunt was from my father's, and my mother is my mother, different sides. So different family members, but they're all very supportive. Some of them economically, they do what they can. Others are supportive with what they can do, which would be helping to watch or cooking or cleaning or whatever they can do. So that was the first thing I did, and of course after that try and find groups to help. So it's hard to find any one place that can give you that. So it took a little bit of research, and that's when I found the Memory Disorder Clinic, but in addition to that found some help through a Medicaid program that helps with caregiving, so that you can continue to have your loved one in the home.
Sherry?
Yeah, for me it was family, and we were blessed that my parents had 7 children, and then they had lots of children. So we pretty much created a schedule, because again I was still working, and so I would go by in the morning and afternoon, but I made sure like a niece would check on her for lunch or make sure she was eating and taking medication. So absolutely family.
Pam?
Actually the doctors, and at the time I had a friend who in the church whose husband had Alzheimer's, and she told me about the support group, and I went to that a few times. I don't go to it anymore, but I did go there, and I did get some good information about other resources. I've been to, I can't remember the title, but it was a summit that was held, I think they do it once a year, with a lot of different memory organizations, and they come together and sort of do overview of dementia and the resources in the community, and those have been incredibly helpful to getting more information.
And Audrey, when folks come in and they're getting that diagnosis, is that something you talk with them about right at the start?
Absolutely, and in our model, it's a obvious medical assessment, but it's a multidisciplinary assessment, and part of it is assessing what the caregiver needs as well, so that we can start providing support, provide all sorts of resources, whether it is support groups or educational programs or other programs where you can get some assistance with care, so that the person living with dementia can get some care while the caregiver maybe has a chance to do something else, whether it's working or taking care of their own needs.
Well, Audrey and I want to thank Debbie, Susan, Sherry, and Pam for sharing your stories and your journeys with us and being part of this discussion about dementia. I'd also like to thank the First United Methodist Church of Winter Park for hosting us, and be sure to check out our full series about dementia. Welcome to the Vital Living series, Conversations on Dementia. We welcome Debbie, Susan, Sherry, Pam, and Audrey Hauser-Burnett with Orlando Health Center for Aging and Memory Disorder Clinic. Now, in this second segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that as caregivers you've encountered and the strategies that you've used as well to get through those challenges. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these challenges. And if there's one that just kind of comes to mind, if we just say, what is one challenge you had as a caregiver that's at the forefront, what would that be? Sherry?
Probably the time that it takes, so you can't be in a hurry. Like when I would stop by to see my mom, I had to plan for it, you know, because I may think, oh, I'm going to stop by on the way to work, it'll take 10 minutes, but I may go in there to give her medication, and that's the day she doesn't want to take it. Right. So lots of flexibility, and, you know, there's a time challenge that you have to plan for.
So Pam, for you, handling the diagnosis and the life with a partner has to be very challenging.
It is. The thing that I miss the most is the communication that we had, as you know, good married couples hopefully have. Decision making, I really, I mean, I could talk to him, but he gets confused and frustrated, and he stops me from going any further. So it's, I've had to really edit what I say and how I say it to him, which is not as free as it was before the dementia, and it's difficult to have somebody. I mean, it doesn't change each day. It's he could be good and better than the day before, but I never know what it's going to be. And maybe the next day it's worse than it was 2 days ago. So it's a real challenge to deal with that on a daily basis.
Susan, what challenges have you seen, both managing life with your aunt and now with your mother?
Well, two challenges come to mind. The first one is emotional. And so my mother understands that she's losing her memory. That may not be the case for everyone. Some people just don't know, and of course they lose their memory. But my mother understands that, so she's mourning the loss of herself. And so there's times when she becomes severely depressed. And I like to say that I'm a fixer. I want to fix everything. She needs breakfast, I'll get breakfast. She needs to go to the gym, well, we're going to make it to the gym. But I can't fix depression. So how we've dealt with it is, again, as family. So I'm the caregiver, I'm right there, I'm there all the time. But my sister will pick her up and take her to go do karaoke with her grandchildren. And my mother comes home so happy. She's forgotten that she's sick, and she's forgotten that, that she was depressed earlier in the day. And so that was super helpful, being able to just take her away from that. We don't even discuss why she was depressed. We just do something that's fun with the family. The other challenge that comes to mind is a physical one. When my aunt was in late stage, she couldn't walk and she wasn't able to communicate. And everything had to be done for her. She was in my home. We had people come in and help, but that's not 24 hours. And I was afraid that my body would fail me or fail her. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to carry her or feed her or move her. Because my inability to do that would mean a nursing home, which is not what we wanted as a family. So those were the challenges I faced, the biggest ones for me.
Debbie, what kind of challenges did you see? And you yourself are a physician,
Yes.
so you understand it from a medical perspective as well.
Yeah.
What challenges are
I
you
would echo
seeing?
the time challenge, but my biggest challenge is the lack of support from my family. They pretty much abandoned me to take care of my mother by myself.
And I think what I'm hearing is that there are all these issues and challenges that arise that you could never anticipate.
Right.
So, and sometimes on a daily basis you can't anticipate it. So you have to get up each morning with I guess an open mind that there might be some things ahead of you that you didn't prepare for.
And for me, it was like even the appointment to take her, we thought we were doing the right thing. Let's go get you checked out, for the diagnosis. And even that was difficult. Like no one prepares you for that because they're going through all these tests or, they're like drilling questions at her. And she had a complete breakdown right there. And you want her to go through it. I'm like, Mom, it's for the best. They want you to do this. And it felt like, for her, like, why are they beating me up like this, So it's like those kind of things is hard to prepare for.
Absolutely.
And what about appointments and just taking care of we talked a lot about the emotional side, but taking care of the medical side of it with someone who may not completely understand why they're there.
Right. And she didn't understand why she was there. And we all knew, and we want her to, what for the best for her, so we want her to do it. And it's things even like with the medication. It's just too much medication. I don't want to take this medication, so every day was a challenge. One day we could walk in and she'd take it, the next day, or because she was taking it twice a day, she didn't want to take it, so it's like they don't understand. And we want to push, and we, sometimes you have to just stop and not push so much because it's what we want. And, we have to respect how they're feeling too. So it's like a balance.
Pam, what about you with your husband? How are appointments, medical appointments?
I usually drive him, go with him just so that the dialogue between the physician and my husband is on point. He's pretty agreeable to go to appointments and things. He too, it's been mentioned earlier that he does know he has it. He frequently says he feels like he's falling down the rabbit hole. He too gets depressed. I've been very proactive on that one though, and have used his doctor, and with benefit of Audrey's expertise, we've managed to get his medicine up so that he is not crying every day and depressed and all of this negative stuff, because it really, I think, impinges on everything else that he's trying to do. He really is trying hard to be the best that he can be for as long as he can be. But the doctor appointments can be a challenge. He had just a short little story, which was new to me. He had a problem with his toe the other day, and he wasn't telling me anything about what was going on. And I looked at it and I thought, there's a serious problem here. Friday, he didn't have a podiatrist. I managed to get him an appointment. At a last minute, he went in there. He ended up having the surgery to fix it and put on antibiotics. Had I not pushed in that situation, we would have been during the weekend, and what do? Go to the emergency room? I mean, I don't know. Just the whole thing was another example of how he's not making good decisions. And that was a new experience for me. Oh well, just one more thing that I have to pay attention to, and not assume that he has a cognitive ability to make the right decisions.
And that puts an incredible amount of pressure on you all as caregivers, right, Debbie? And you say doing this without the family support, that has to be just an immense amount of pressure.
I do have to say, my mom loves doctor's appointments. She hates waiting, but she has a very good visual memory. So I've taken pictures. I've asked permission, and I have pictures of all of her doctors. So while we're waiting, I keep showing her the pictures. But she's, as a late stage as she is, she's very social, and she goes in and she chats with the doctors, and they usually end up going, why is your mother in memory care? You know, because she sort of gets up for those appointments. So it's kind of a fun thing to see her do that.
And that's, again, sort of looking at someone's abilities.
Yes.
And a lot of people maintain some great social skills that we need to really support. And like you say, she loves going to doctor's appointments. Not that you want to make extra doctor's appointments, but you know, Susan's mother loves karaoke, so you try to, you know, integrate those sorts of positive activities into the person's life and benefit to them and to you.
Well, Debbie, Susan, Sherry, and Pam, thank you very much for sharing some of your challenges and strategies and what's working and what's not working as you have provided for your loved ones. And stay tuned for our third and final segment where we'll get more advice from our guests. Each year, unpaid caregivers provide more than 18 billion hours of unpaid care to those with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. That's billions of hours. And this care is valued at over $232 billion. In our final Vital Living segment, we're going to talk with the caregivers to get their advice as to how they're handling with their loved ones the realities that they face with brain changes. And of course, joining us here are Debbie, Susan, Sherry, Pam, and Audrey Hauser-Burnett with Orlando Health Center for Aging and Memory Disorder Clinic. So let's talk about this adaptation of life and how that came about, when that came about. Let's go ahead and start with you, Debbie. And what is that meant for your life?
I used to be pretty physically active, a lot of water sports. That's pretty much gone at this point. But what I've decided to do is to try to be healthy in other ways. I try to, like every weekend, part of my weekend is cooking and trying to make good food for myself, and I try to make sure I exercise 2 to 3 times a week. But it's just, I have to schedule it in.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Susan, as you're caring for your mother?
My life has, I'd like to say, hasn't changed very much because I transitioned from taking care of my children who, at the time that my mother got sick, by then they had just gone off to college. Mm-hmm. So I went from cooking dinner to cooking dinner. So I just incorporated mom, the purpose of moving in together was that, to incorporate her and me into her life, her and the mine. So one of the things I did do to make sure that I wasn't impacted too much, which is along the lines of what you said earlier, that was to have specific days for specific things. And so a day just for me, and that's either Saturday or Sunday to do what I'd like to do. And I have my cousin as well as my grown children are in the home, so they're there to help with mom for anything that mom needs. And then appointments on a specific day. So any appointment I make could be just all on Mondays. So that I don't have an appointment on Monday, an appointment on Wednesday, an appointment on Thursday, you just make them all for one day. It's kind of the way my life has changed and how I've been able to make it work.
And it sounds like you have found a new routine, well, some of the same routines, but also new routine. How's your mother handled that type of routine? Is that routine important to her?
It is. So she has a whole separate routine, and I thank God for Cousin Greg. Because I do work, but I work from the home, so it's different for me than a lot of other working people. But I still work. Mm-hmm. I can't just get up and take mom somewhere, but Cousin Greg does. So every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, she goes to the YMCA like she has her whole life. And every Sunday, she goes to church like she has her whole life. And so we keep her as independent as possible. And it's because of those extra people in my life that has made that possible for Mom.
Sherry, let's talk a little bit about routine.
Yes.
How important is that?
Tough. That was probably a really tough time in my life because I had a husband, and you know, at the time he was 6 years old. We had just adopted my son. We adopted my son, and then the same year my mom passed. So he didn't understand, you know, like you need to be home, but at the same time you need to be a mom. I didn't trust everybody. I felt like I needed to be there with her at all times. So it is a constant struggle. It's a balance that, you know, and it tugs at your heartstring. So, I mean, I can't even make it pretty. When you have two families, two households, and, you know, that you need to take care of equally.
And Pam, the balance.
Yeah, it's pretty simple for me right now because my husband is pretty high functioning. And I am as active in a couple of community organizations in my church as possible because I know that that's not going to be possible in the future. And I continue to try and get my husband engaged in other things within the community. So and I don't work, so, I mean, I don't work for money. I obviously have great value according to your numbers, but I don't work for money.
Yes.
Yeah.
In caregiving, it is, Audrey, a full-time, it really is a full-time job, in addition to other full-time jobs that folks have.
Absolutely. It is like doing multiple jobs, and the challenge is always balancing out your multiple responsibilities. And, you know, Sherry, you mentioned having a young child that needs your guidance and
the husband.
And the husband, exactly, as well as your mom. And I think your other job was sort of the coordinator of all the care as well.
Yes.
So I think everyone takes on additional responsibilities, and it does get overwhelming for a lot of people, which is why it is so important for caregivers to take that time to do those things that are important to them, but also maybe to take some time to participate in a support group or go to educational sessions where you can learn more, because that can hopefully ease some of the issues that come up with caregiving. So it's really important to look at a variety of different ways to better balance things and to help lessen some of those responsibilities.
I add something to that. One of the things that was a surprise to me is, as I've learned more and more about Alzheimer's in particular, because that was my husband's diagnosis, is that there's no linear progression. And the couple of times that I did go to groups, I mean, it had value because I definitely got some new information from those other caregivers. But I think the one thing that was probably not the hardest, but a real surprise to me is that I have a story, and in terms of the daily experience with my spouse. You have a different story, you have a different story, and you have a different story, and they're not going to be the same because my husband's Alzheimer's is progressing different because he's a different personality than your mother. I mean, and that's the thing that it's just mind-boggling, frankly. I can't call Audrey because she's involved with my husband's caregiver or doctor, and say, this is what's going on now, what should I do, or what's going to happen next. She can give me some suggestions, but we don't know what's going to happen next. Tomorrow is different. So that to me is probably, I haven't come across that necessarily in the reading that I've done, but it's difficult. It's really difficult because you don't really have shared caregivers. I mean, there are similarities, but it's different.
Everyone's experience is different, and
Yeah,
there's that
it's all
uncertainty.
different.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Right?
yeah.
That uncertainty of what the future is going to hold, what the next
Exactly.
day could hold. Do you find that you have looked to support groups, even though you do have different experiences, or look to folks who support you along the way? Are there programs here in the community that are helpful to you?
Well, and we learned about the programs, again, working so closely with Mimi. But I know a lot of people really don't know about the support group, for example. And then another thing is, like, you feel like you don't have time to take on another meeting or go to another thing. It's like you're already stretched. Like, I'm taking care of mom. Still have to go home and make sure family's with dinner, you know. So it's just, sometimes it feels a little bit more stressful to go somewhere.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Debbie, what do you think?
Well, I found there was a dementia series, like a 6-week series, and I think they run it. I found that program very educational. I don't have time to go to a weekly support group, but I have friends in town that are very supportive, and you can kind of always tell who's been through it or familiar with it, because they always ask me how I'm doing first, and instead of asking first about my mother.
And when they say, put your oxygen mask on before you help someone else, that sounds like so true for your situations as well.
I do think caregivers can become isolated because you are using all your time with all the responsibilities, caregiving and other responsibilities, and I think that is one of the reasons why support group interaction can be good, but again, it's one more thing to add to your already too long list. So it's something that not everyone can participate in.
Well, Audrey and Debbie, Susan, Sherry, and Pam, thank you very much. And when we come back, we're going to take some questions from our audience. Welcome back. Now we're going to take some questions from our audience. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Raina. I'm with DCF. The question is for Ms. Debbie. I noticed that you were crying in reference to as being a caregiver, you don't have family members to help. Why is that? Is it because they choose not to, or is it because they don't have time, or?
Well, part of it is they're in Pennsylvania. And I would say part of the family is unwilling to help and part of the family is unable. I have a medically disabled brother who can't get here. But the other part of the family has resources and has just not chosen to come more than once or twice a year.
And the other question is that, have you ever thought of hiring a home health aide to come into the home to help you?
Very early on, but my mother's dementia has progressed to the point that she really needs to be in a secure facility at this point.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we have one more question.
Hi, I was just wondering if, in looking back on your experience to date, if there's one tip or piece of advice or whatever that you would give other caregivers that, as small as it would be, just helped, maybe made your day a little easier, your person's day a little easier. Do you have any just tip that you could share?
For me, it would be to recruit I call it a love partner. So someone that you trust, because for me, it's like having someone that I never trust anyone to be with my mom. Like, I wanted to be there for her all the time, and I couldn't do that. So I needed to find someone else that I trust as equally as myself. So that's the.
Anybody else?
And for me, it was simply just roll with it. So what they see in front of them, what they are experiencing is their reality. It's not reality, but it's their reality. So if she says the sky is green, the sky is green.
Absolutely.
And if she says, no, you didn't tell me, no, I guess I didn't tell her.
Yeah.
And if she says, did you move that? I said, I certainly did. And you just roll with it because you want to have a positive, good experience. If you argue with them and tell them they're wrong, what you have is resentment, and they're angry, and it's an argument. And that's not really what I want, and plus you can't really win that fight. So I roll with it.
To me, it would be immerse yourself in every bit of information that's out there. Don't be afraid to, you know, if you need to get a new doctor, get a new doctor. Support groups for me initially were really helpful. Talking to people whose parents or whatever relative had dementia was helpful. The internet is a phenomenal resource. The information's out there. It's out there, and that's what I think. Oftentimes, I'm going to speak for everybody here. There's a certain amount of denial, but you know, I think intuitively that something's wrong. And once you get that diagnosis, then man, you have to be a dog, and you have to go shake that bone until you get every morsel off of it, because you need that information in order to make it through your life.
Well, thank you so much to our audience, and thank you to our guests, Debbie, Susan, Sherry, and Pam. Audrey and I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your challenges, your advice as caregivers. And we hope that you have found their advice beneficial. And be sure to watch our companion show where we talk with individuals who are leading lives with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia.